Hello, good evening. Welcome, everyone. My name is Miguel Amado. I'm the director of Sirius Art Centre, an organisation based in Cove, County Cork, Ireland. It's a great pleasure and honour to have the opportunity to share some thoughts about Ofri Cnaani's work. Welcome, Ofri. Thank you so much for being here. Ofri is an exhibition currently at Sirius Art Centre, solo show, which comes to an end now by the end of this week and opened in June. Has been here at Sirius in Cove early 2020, prior to COVID-19, on a site visit. And we've been working on ideas for different kinds of projects. And the exhibition is one of them. It's called Statistical Bodies. And the occasion today is also to celebrate the presentation of another work called Accidental Triggers, which is part of a program that Sirius organizes called Sirius Digital, basically online or work or digital work or work made for online viewing, which then it becomes accessible on our Vimeo channel on a permanent basis. And we're going to split the meeting, the session today, more or less around that. Ofri has been related to my work since a few years ago when we met in London in the context of a PhD program called Curatorial/Knowledge at Goldsmiths, University of London. Maybe Ofri can discuss some of that if she wants in terms of her research and practice. And this project, all this collaboration with Ofri has been made possible through different kinds of support, but most important by RTs, an organization based in New York, and we thank them a lot for the support they have provided to Ofri and to this dialogue. So we could maybe start by enabling Ofri to introduce herself a bit, and then show maybe rather than me show some images of the works that are on display at Sirius at the moment, and then we can take the conversation from there. I believe that what would be interesting would be to maybe describe what people are seeing for those who have not had the opportunity, although just the installation shots, they just give a little bit of an impression. And then maybe we can discuss the conceptual framework that lies behind these images, and then take it from there.
Okay, so we'll start from the images in the exhibition and then move to the video, right? Okay.
And just to conclude, just of course, everyone can interrupt us and jump into the conversation, and there will be moments for that as well, but feel free to be with us.
Okay, so thank you so much, Miguel, and thank you, artists, for being here and for the ongoing support. And yeah, so my name is Ofri. I think some of us know each other already. And I'm an artist. I'm currently based in London. And as Miguel mentioned, I'm both teaching and researching, completing my PhD at Goldsmiths, and spending quite a lot of time thinking on kind of new and invented methodologies or different kind of practices and how theory can emerge from practice. That's on one hand. And in terms of research interests, I look at one case specifically, and maybe we'll speak about it later, but kind of trying to think about, I would say, post-museum era, and kind of the residues, whether they're body, matter, or data, and I think it's very much related to today, after the museum, and how can we think about them as, as a mode of working and doing cultures and doing things together, kind of beyond the museum as the main institution for knowledge production and knowledge organization. So that's in more general. And so I would say in terms of fields of knowledge, I'm interested in performance making and thinking, and oftentimes performance as research, and then the algorithmic turn or data studies, internet studies, and as well as museum. And I think definitely in the video today, all those three elements will culminate, so it will be interesting. But let's start from the exhibition. The exhibition includes a couple of images. They're all photographic images, and the way I organize it, I'm going to show you the actual image, and then zoom in, because they are full with many texts, and it's really hard to see otherwise. So this is the first image, and under this title, Statistical Bodies, all of those images are, they are fully, I would say, directed. They're all featuring me or different body parts, and kind of work on I would say, two traditions of knowing and predicting the future. One is different methods from ancient methods of healing, care, knowing oneself and one's future through a different system of analysis, the body, or body analytics. And in all those images, they somehow intersect with current data, algorithmic driven systems of data, of knowledge and prediction that are based somehow on extracting knowledge or extracting data from oneself, either based on movement or based on personal information or based on one's body. Oftentimes, I ask myself, how can we get in touch, I would say, with kind of major shifts of data-driven or Google current state of algorithmic-driven capitalism through what the body knows. So the first image is this one. It's called "You Are My Statistical Body." It was also shown, presented now in Venice Architectural Biennial at the Austrian Pavilion. As you can see here, maybe I have another, yeah, and I have a zoom in. I'm somehow basically kind of developed a system which is based on acupuncture points, the pressure points, but each one of those pressure points that's once again been, it's an ancient Asian tradition of knowing, analyzing, and on kind of working with the body in order to take care of the body and its well-being, are being kind of replaced by different kind of information that is being extracted from the body. So it's organized by user information and social, and you can see anything from password to PIN code, traveling history, current location. And if I'm moving to the right hand, it will be anything from credit history, mortgage, phone number, email, daily screen time, calories burned, mood swing, and a lot of other information that are being collected on us every day. And we are actually not only kind of silently agreeing to that, but also contributing to that through different systems, through allowing our GPS to be open, through connecting between our different platforms, but also through reporting and updating our quantified self platforms, and so on and so forth. The second image called "Any of the Following," and maybe in terms of tradition, it refers to, so it's much more related to palm reading and different points on the palms that, again, kind of traditionally collect knowledge on the self. But instead of these are kind of being replaced by actually questions, and all those questions are they are inspired by productivity questionnaires that are being kind of produced by corporations, and now they're no longer apparently called productivity questionnaires, but engagement questionnaires in tech and kind of different, that tech companies are trying to change the work environment. But they all kind of playing with this style of questioning, but leave it, I would say, much more open and oftentimes absurd. Do you feel accomplished? Do you have any hobbies? Do you sometimes work for free? Are you having hard time during mealtime at work? And then it ends up with, are you bored? But did your rent go up lately? Did you get any raise in your salary lately? So I originally started to work on these kind of questionnaires with former work of mine, and maybe I should say that in the way I work, methods and styles and questions, sometimes texts are always being dragged from one piece to another. I'm very good in time-based practices. So I started to think about this idea of productivity that is so central, obviously, to in kind of employment relations, but also very central in the work of an artist, right? What is production when I am productive? So the questions are kind of, I don't know, sending little messages on the set of problematics around productivity and around kind of precarious condition of working. Miguel, feel free to jump in if you want to add, and then I'll just show two more work. The next one called a quantified self. So quantified self, as most of you probably know, it's a group, it's a family of platforms and technologies that are based on measuring, collecting, measuring, archiving, and also sharing and I would say socializing through data that is related to our own bodies and oftentimes associated with our health and, and quality of life. So the very simple one is step measuring, and the very complex one are anxiety measuring, sleep patterns, obviously, sugar level, blood pressure. But there are many today that are more related to more ambiguous senses and more kind of mental state. And when I started to look at these set of technologies, I was interested in 2 points. One is they all have this feature of the auto-sync. So there's this grand fantasy of complete synchronization of oneself or our bodies and our data and, in the spatial environment. So the auto-sync, which I found some kind of a very problematic feature is became like the ultimate goal. It's like, I don't want to see how the body is being extracted. I don't want to know how the data is coming back. There's this auto-sync, complete synchronicity, kind of frictionless movement or motion of our bodies and data. The other thing I was very interested in was this idea that our kind of body is no longer perceived as, to think about it more, I would say, in terms of surveillance. And the argument here that if we, in the last, I don't know, let's say, let's take more advanced technologies. So the last 50 or 60 years moved from visual surveillance with cameras and other and other capturing machines into more kind of GPS and location based surveillance. Uber know where we're at any point and what we paid with our credit card, but more and more surveillance systems are going into the deepest and more abstract system of the body, as our breathing or our kind of blood density or our urine and our saliva, and everything is being measured, everything is being coded, everything is being being captured. And in this piece specifically, I was interested, I would say, in the uncomputable, or the elements that are always refused to be captured. And I remember writing here, and maybe I'll read it, that the very, very last line is that the imperfect edges that represent the spaces of reduced governmentality. As for all of our concerns, there is always something that drops out. The same old issue with anxiety, the frustration of being stuck, the social fatigue, the slow violence of feeling empty, the tiring hope that someone will understand us without words, the tendency to give up trying, the inability to relate, the feeling that no matter what you do, there is always something wrong, the shame of self-harm, the resentment of someone you once loved, the smell of night sweat, the raw flesh, the unequal breathing from both sides, the itching of jealousy, the rage, the boredom, the numbness of scrolling down, the irritation of losing a thread of thoughts. And this is only a few of them here, but here you can see them. So they kind of traveling between data point and in and out of the body. And these are all those texts. And there are about 20 or 25 of them. And I think I'm actually missing one piece, but it's the last one I have today. It's called energetic property. And here, kind of I would say the practice I was referring in terms of one kind of occult or traditional technique of channeling energy and prediction is kind of the idea of good stones and minerals, but all the minerals I'm holding here are minerals that are being extracted, and they are the one that allowing our kind of mini electrons. So I'll just maybe, let's see, no, I don't have. So if you can see here, you'll see that each one, there is this kind of matrix that connect different minerals to their geography where they're being extracted, and sometimes it's few places around the world. And those places are also connected somehow through different minerals, but also in those teal color boxes, you see each one and what is supporting. So it could be the vibration system, the speakers, the electronics, the display, the battery, and so on and so forth. So this kind of qualities and knowledges of this device that we are so dependent on is being here abstracted and being kind of reminding us that all our electronic and all our social and entertainment are some sort of mini minds, that are being extracted in a very specific working conditions, and and there's a cycle of very problematic metrics that's going on in here. So this is my long introduction.
I would suggest that I show you some pictures of how the work is presented in the gallery. And then I could ask a couple of questions to follow up. So let me share my screen. Excuse me. I share my screen. I'm a bit basic today. Yeah, okay, sorry. Second. Yeah, can you see my screen now? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a view of the gallery space where the work is presented. So it's the images were enlarged printed in quite large scale because of the relevance of the text that Ofri presented, and when she zoomed into some of them so that we could actually be able to read. and it's a simple display in the sense of presenting these 5 photographs. Ofri mentioned 4, and you can give, the first one which Ofri presented, it she's also here with the hands covering the face, is at the beginning of the series. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that's correct.
And it's actually when I saw this image that it became obvious to me that there could be something here to further explore in terms of exhibition. And it's also why the work is isolated on one hand, but also it's probably the work that has a stronger impact from a viewer's perspective, and somehow introduces the key questions that seem to be addressed by Ofri in this body of works, which is this connection between ideas of self-care and healing, which has a lot of mysticism around it, tradition, almost like an analog culture. And of course that questions of care and self-care became crucial during the COVID-19 pandemic, and re-emerged with a lot of strength in not only in public discourse, but also in medical discourse, in art practice, and so on. So this idea of the palm reading, the palms as something where which can dictate your future and prediction. So this was really part of the work that Ofri was doing in terms of creating the, and then how she engaged with that in terms of self-care and healing and energy. And then the transition to data and data attached to the body. So it's not just data, the algorithm playing a role in shaping our lives, and how capitalism today is a sort of like late capitalism became an algorithmic capitalism with the power that companies like Google and others have, but also the digitization of everyday life being where we individuals become we kind of strip ourselves from our status as citizens into subjects of data production and data distribution and data recipients. And the majority of us don't really understand how, our Google searches or our bank transactions online generate this information, and this information is equivalent to either financial power or political power, or how it translates from one to the other. So this work somehow combined that, and it's very visually engaging because of also the diagrammatic use of the kind of superimposition of the diagrammatic layout of the text with the hands, remembering the ideas of hand and writing and reading, palm reading. And then it evolves into other works that we already saw here, where it becomes more fluid, and coming to an end with this piece, which the one here with around the minerals, which is the work that somehow it's easier to read, say in terms of connections between, say, e-capitalism and questions of extractivism, because we know that, say, my MacBook Air, which I'm using now to be in this Zoom conversation, is some of the elements that make it are based on minerals that are extracted, say, in say in Central Africa. And we all know that this extractivism basically reproduces global inequality. The majority of the profit that is generated by companies like Apple doesn't benefit the original the original source of raw materials, or the labor that enabled those raw materials to be then introduced into the capitalist production system. And somehow this is just a continuation of say imperial/colonial practices that emerged centuries ago. So this one, but it's quite powerful in a sense of, this narrative is there, although, but the work is much it's not just about that. It's about this idea of healing and looking and using the body and different understandings of the body. For me, what is also very striking here, and then maybe Ofri can make a comment, is, say, someone our age who were born in the mid 70s or so. We, when we were growing, things like Blade Runner, sci-fi, where bodies no longer are flesh, they start to be also mechanic. The idea of the cyborg. So the idea of inserting, inscribing, even in the skin, data, information, technology was quite futuristic when we were growing, and now it's a reality. So we kind of witness this evolution. And here it's very poetic how there is this connection. So it's the body, it's not just about the mind, it's also the physicality and how our bodies convey technology today, even in ways that we don't understand or know. But there is almost this inscription. And of course, that this inscription in the body, that the letters and the texts can make, or the points that are triggered, relate to data scans, relate to tattooing, and how does tattooing relate to ancient cultures, and data scans and digital imaging relate to technology. So that's why there's a lot here. And of course, as you can see, when we see the pictures next to each other, the presentation of the body, the self-representation in terms of art practice and photographic use of the body, it's quite important and known in conceptual, from say in art practice from the 70s onwards, particularly the female body, which somehow challenges how the male gaze was dominant and how the uses of self-representation enable a sort of empowering an agency that is that is performed and enacted by the female body. So here there are also these connections that we can identify in terms of lineage of where the work comes from. And do you want to say a few words more, Ofri, about this, and then we can maybe open it up?
Maybe if you can move to between the picture. No, keep going, or keep coming back. Yeah, I want to say to say about this one. Yeah, so just the image that I did not mention before is an image. The one with the profile is kind of referring more to the highly problematic science of phrenology, of study the skull and different distances and different and skull structure to know and to observe the personality. So and the texts are all based on using my body as the measuring system to measure in a very poetic way new distances that are produced, I would say, by kind of the platform living. So they're all like a distance between my sleep to my watch, or the distance between I don't know, my credit card and the coffee, or different distances that are not necessarily a physical one, but I'm using the body to measure them. And like the image in that you kind of spoke about with the mineral, this one as well, traveling back to to colonial sources and colonial kind of knowledge productions. So the phrenology for sure. Maybe I'll just
Ofri, let me just comment on that. Yeah, so phrenology is, just to make to put it in context, it's this pseudoscience in the 19th century that justified basically racism or European white superiority with respect to peoples from non-European background. And so kind of according to the size of the skull, or people will
the shape of the nose and how big the forehead is.
And it started within it started within some, or if I'm not wrong, in kind of the police context. So ways of identifying people who in society were in the fringes. And then it evolved, the tools evolved into justifying white supremacy and superiority. And we all know about this. I mean, we see the headshots even in police stations, or the headshots in anthropological museums, where people were clearly identified in this way. So the reference here is also very important. And that's why the work becomes even more complex, because it ties the current conditions in which we live today, particularly in the West, within a neoliberal order, with colonial stories and narratives.
Yeah, and we should not forget, and I think here it's hinted, but that the algorithm and different data is being collected, but data is in a raw form. So when it's become information, is always the way that data is being organized around a question, right? Around a request to know that or not, and then that become information. Information, a little bit like this is obviously a very, very extremely problematic and extreme example of pseudoscience, but even in today's way of collecting knowledge and organizing and plotting it back, we see many forms of oppression and many forms of biases, and often, and quite a few of them. Happily, the wonderful Sophia Nobel just got the MacArthur Fellow Awards yesterday, who wrote Algorithm of Oppression and a lot of writing about color, gender representation through algorithms and the field of algorithm biases, and it's related to gender and groups, and the more the group is, the less it's represented in society. Let's say Black women, less the data is being collected, the more likely for the group to be represented, approach as a group and less as individual. And this is just one thing. We know many, many cases of hiring cases and others. We can speak about it, but just to say that also the way that algorithms work, they are not clear or clean from kind of colonial perspectives and racial representation or racial concerns. You're muted.
It is as if the algorithm also has its unconscious bias, let's say, because basically
it's been designed by someone. That's why I mentioned. That's why I mentioned it's not the data, it's the question, it's the information, it's the way it's being organized and served. It's always there's a question that is always been asked, and that's.
Kilit, you seem to be interested in asking something.
Yeah. I am. First of all, thank you so much. The works are absolutely beautiful, exquisite, and the exhibition looks amazing. Ofri, I wonder, have you encountered any collective ways of resisting this over-extraction of data that don't necessarily relate to big tech? So it's not necessarily like turning off, your location, services, and all of that, but something that's really a form of organized resistance. You
mean as an art form, like a new mineral collective, or
either as an art form or just as a form of protest?
No, I would say one thing, and that's actually in relation to the example you said, I would say the option of opting out, turn off your GPS or not using Amazon services. And I think a lot of the kind of conversation around that is that as time is moving on, this option of resistance by I rather not to, as we say, right? The choice of opting out is less available for us. Because even, you never know which company that you're using, it might be your supermarket, is using Amazon server as a storage platform. So things are so entangled to the way of, and you can use something I just heard yesterday about Google giving indigenous groups in Brazil to collect petrol pollution, but I don't remember exactly the entire case, so I'll maybe stop here. But it's once again becoming extremely problematic on the other side. So just to say that this form of resistance of is less and less available to us. In terms of both writing, I think the entire terraforming in Sturka and in UC Parika, there's a lot of writing about kind of media geology and more kind of research about thinking about data and media in terms of deep time and deep material, and same as art projects. So I just read today something about New Mineral Collective, but I think there are different projects that are looking at sites of extractions and the kind of the material aspect of the production of our media.
So, I find it very interesting that criticality also almost goes hand in hand with complicity. One has to be completely immersed in this system in order to also be critical of it. And the two are not separated. But just one more question, if I might. I'm wondering what next? In other words, are you thinking of other forms of this particular exhibition?
As I mentioned
before, put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think this group as a group is done, but as I mentioned before, all my work are kind of continuing one another, and I think the project that we'll see, we'll watch now a 6-minute video that I'm very thankful for Miguel to host it and screen it, because I actually did it before I've done this one, pre-COVID, and it's so crazily relevant to the recent work I'm doing, and you know a little bit about it, Hilit. So a lot of those projects are kind of interconnected. I'm working on a project that is specifically looking at contactless technologies and the way they are kind of shaping and kind of working with performance to think about those gaps, the empty gaps of technology sorry, I'm traveling between theory and art always, but to think about this space of non-touch that is actually a space of enhanced governmentality. That's all the data is being about your bank, about your location, about all of that, and trying to connect it actually back to museums where touch is always prohibited, and connected back to colonialism, to actually propose that contactless is almost a it's almost it's a colonial condition. It's not a contemporary. It's not so much a contemporary technology as way as this idea of synchronous, which I spoke about, the auto-sync, but the synchronous is a way of narrating, right? That everything is happening at the same time, and we have a free movement, which is very much of kind of, again, colonial argumentation. So these are not like, but I think both this project, the video we'll see, and the recent project that I'm working on, Leaking Lens, are all kind of bringing together bodies, data, and the kind of seeming gentle way they going through our bodies and systems, not like clear surveillance and not cyber, just kind of the way that is much easier to ignore. And I bring into this conversation also museum cultures, and I would say the relation between bodies, objects, and data. And in my work, I oftentimes try to approach them with other way the body know how to know, like pleasure, like pleasure.
But it's just to conclude here, I mean, it's also very important, like the idea of touching, exactly. So, last year when COVID-19 appeared, and in Europe and say the United States, in the West, we started having lockdowns, and this idea of we couldn't touch, touch became forbidden because there was this idea that the virus could be transmitted from touching surfaces or touching people, whatever. So this, and then so almost like and we all know that, for instance, in traditional practice of healing, touching the body, touching the pressure points, it's fundamental. The manipulation of the body through the hands of someone else or our own, it's fundamental. So it became very interesting to engage with these works and other works that Ofri was making, and reflections and the research towards the PhD and other, because there were so many things brought together, and they were really, really kind of like urgent within the context within the experience that we were going through. And so there's a lot.
We studied together.
Sorry?
We did a whole series of studying.
Yeah, exactly. So this is really interesting, and I propose that we now watch the video, Licking Lenses, new video that Ofri is doing, Accidental Triggers. That's the one we're going to watch. It's 6 minutes. I'm going to share the screen and play it, and then we can have a conversation around the work and see where there are similarities and differences, because Ofri just said this piece was made before this series, but somehow there are connections there, and it's quite interesting in terms of the use of the words and the sort of liquidity that is not so much present in the photographs, but somehow brings us not to the surface of the body, but somehow the interior of the body. So like a different kind of journey. So
do you want me to say a few words before, or shall we watch it first?
I'd rather enable us to watch, and then you could comment after that.
Great.
So kind of like avoiding interpretation prior to the actual engaging with the work. Okay, so let's do that now. Give me a second, please.
I think you need to take it back to the beginning. Miguel, we don't hear the sound.
You can't hear sound, right?
No, we can't. Do you want me to try and play it?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yes.
Because it's playing with sound here, but sometimes the Zoom doesn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise, I can try to from the V machine.
Yeah, let me try and do it.
Okay.
And just tell me immediately if you hear the sound.
There's some.
So I prepared these cute stuff.
Oh gosh, very sorry. I don't know why this is. Wait. Something is going wrong here. Sorry about that. Let's try to.
Cute stuff. I wasn't going to show this part, but this is so satisfying. You have no idea. When I pulled it, I was like, oh, 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 oh. This is a very dense cloud cream. It's almost not even a cloud cream. It's more like a cloud doughy texture. There is a little bit of fallout. I'm not usually a big fan of cloud creams, but I saw these colors and I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to snatch this. It's so visually pleasing. This is stretchy, it's soft, it's really good bubble pops. I wouldn't say it's thick, it's definitely more creamy than thick. I like that they're colored. It is so sizzly, so airy, light, fluffy, has the most amazing texture. I cannot. I am obsessed. When I say obsessed, I mean I can't stop touching this. I can't. Hype is real. Do you see this right now? Because I'm shook. I hate using that word, but I'm freaking shook. Just as a disclaimer, I purchased my own money, so these are all 100% honest, my own opinion. If I say something bad, just reviewing it from a consumer's point of view.
So I'd like to ask first, maybe start by asking about the text. Like texts, I mean, here I could just take some notes. You are my top priority. We are in this together. So of course it's the expressions, they were pretty much about, you know, the importance of the self. Almost could be what we hear in some sort of like, yeah, kind of personal counseling or healing session. That's fine. We understand that sort of positioning the recipient of those words into a context like where it's all about the other and, you know, the need for well-being and so on. But I'm interested in the text, like, what's your source? Where do they come from? The other things we saw in the photographs, because they have a lot of it's very symbolic. They have lots of symbolism. So I'm interested in the process of arriving to this. Are they sourced from somewhere? Are they almost like poetry?
So the texts in the photographs are my texts. They're obviously, as I mentioned before, the questionnaires or stuff like that, but they're definitely the one I read more of it, which is all the stuff that cannot be captured. They're definitely my lines. It's a longer text, and I Gilit asked before of other kind of, you know, work with those materials. So I do want to work with those texts independently, but here is different. Here, everything, all the text you see, all the text you hear, all the visuals are all existing materials, you can say already made. And the sources are 3 or 4. The images are taken from 3D scans from the British Museum. The sounds are taken from ASMR, from all of these. I became very much interested in kind of the similarity between the kind of the obsession around objects from one hand that exists in ASMR phenomena. That was early on, 2018 and 19. So my main research assistants were my kids. It's not as it's common today, but the similarity in museums, that there's a whole experience that's supposed to lead to some sort of subjectivation or whatever, you know, like a fulfillment or awakening that is only through the sight. You're looking at the object, you know, whether you're looking at people touching and doing things or you're looking just at the object. But I found some similarities between the museum ritual and the one of ASMR. And then the text we heard is also from a video, many videos, but of people who review products for ASMR and slimes. And the other texts are from messaging boards, and from, I mean, some of them are ASMR or autonomous, what's the S? Sensorial meridian response. It's all those mainly videos. Today there are also games like that, that there are some sort of sounds. I'm responding to Tini's question, some sort of sounds or some sort of movement that are triggering. They call accidental triggers. They triggers different feelings, whether are kind of more sensorial arousals, but it's oftentimes not directly sexual, but sometimes it's more of pleasure, and oftentimes it's more of calmness. So a lot of people, a lot of teenagers with insomnia use it actually to fall asleep. And then these, you know, it's one of the most productive part of the internet in terms of, so there are many communities, and the messaging board, there are reviews, internal reviews, all those you will experience euphoria, you will experience, and maybe that, and these are all from reviews people write about other ASMRs, so people in the communities. So this is one side, kind of text, and then the other kind of text are the texts from the advertisements, the YouTube advertisements. So it's oftentimes advertised somehow related stuff, so I took parts of it, and the metadata, how many people watch it, you know, so it's like very simple metadata that is available. But the way I did it is kind of I extract all of them and a little bit made, you know, like more with them, almost like poetry in a way. So kind of very intentionally cut and paste and highlighted and created, hopefully, a kind of a mixed zone that completely blend between pleasure, object, consumptions, production, you know, tactile knowledge, embodied knowledge, high culture knowledge, and I would say capitalist knowledge, you know, like product-based knowledge, and data that is being aggregated and inserted and sold. Because it's such an active community, it's used to be definitely in 18, 19, and early 20s. It's also one of the most kind of productive, like you can cash out, you know, you can sell stuff. It's everything is on somehow product placement universe, you know. And what I wrote, and I think it's very important that once you start to zoom into how much money it's produced for YouTube, because there are a lot of people watching, so there's a lot of advertisement, and people in ASMR review products and sell products. So the products and the objects are never clean. They're always kind of entangled with intentions, ideologies, and ambition, you know, power ambitions, which is exactly what happened in museums, obviously. Objects are always you know, work in a network in an ideological network, and it has relation to power and power structure and knowledge production. So this kind of similarity, I wanted to do it in a way that is not like too didactic, you know, it's by itself is funny and pleasure. Yeah. Miguel, yeah.
So, Tini, do you want to ask any question, or?
Tini's just smiling. Tini, you're muted.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Brilliant presentation and brilliant video. Very impressed. Congratulations. I still didn't understand. I mean, I would like that you maybe you could explain a little bit more this tactility, or the lack of tactility and capitalism. The untouched, you spoke about synchronous, this I could understand, but then this you spoke about the tactility is forbidden in museums, and what conclusion, what is the parallel, what analogy with the capitalism?
Yeah, okay, so two things. First is kind of my first draw to ASMR and the similarity I identified early on between, if you'll watch now that you know it, ASMR videos. So there's, at the end, you know, you look at someone doing, touching objects, you know, with like acrylic nails, brushing on objects. But at the end of the day, you are being, you know, inspired, amused, aroused, respond. You develop, I don't know, developing feeling, but you are developing experience by looking at an object. And the kind of the object-centric culture in general, and specifically the distance, because you never touch the object. And the fact that in both of them, the object is kind of detached from usability, right? Both in museums and in ASMR, those objects are not being used the way they're being designed. They're almost enabled to be used the way they're being designed. So those similarities and the kind of and the fetishistic element that is around looking at object and getting pleasure from object, or getting emotion from objects, and getting I don't know, sense of high or high power from object, and with the distance between the subject and the object, was the first thing that drawn me into this kind of, to draw this similarity. So that's one thing. The connection to you mentioned capitalism, but I mean, so those videos are very productive to both the platform, because so many people are watching them. So YouTube make a lot of money, and the advertisers are making a lot of money. So they are it used a huge boom to, I mean, probably still is, but it was very profitable videos, and very quickly people became like millionaires from producing them. But also the objects they started to use weren't just my, you know, nightcap, but objects that are, it started to be a whole industry of product placements. So that's, in the ASMR, it's more clear. In museum, I would say that objects that are being collected and displayed are also a manifestation of ideological system and exercising of power, right? If a museum in Germany showing Nefertiti, and Nefertiti is not allowed to be photographed, but anyone else is not allowed to travel back to, you know, it's an exercise of domination, right? So that's kind of the similarity I try to draw.
I mean, yeah, I mean, for instance, just another example of what Ofri just mentioned with respect to museums. For instance, when I saw Guernica for the first time in Madrid, it was at the Museum of Prado, and it was behind a glass wall, and you have to walk a lot to actually arrive to the room where it was on display. And it was basically, the protection screen was basically what kept us apart from the work in that sense. So tactical, like touching, was forbidden in that sense. But basically it was exercising what Benjamin called the aura. So like the fetishization of the object there. So basically, you know, using Marxist concepts, you know, like it's like the fetishization of that object is like what happened with merchandise, commodification of the experience when it emerged. And for instance, when it moved to another museum, the Reina Sofia, where it now is located, the principles behind that museum are quite different. So even if it is a massive, major public institution in Spain, it still conveys a sense of resistance and criticality to the state of affairs in which we live. And so, for instance, Guernica is presented now as, like, at least last time I saw it, and I think it's still the same, without such a barrier. in a much more simple way, accessible way in a sense, with guards next to it, but still the physical barrier is no longer there, or at least so strong. So exactly to try to not create, but simulate an experience of proximity in which touch would almost be possible, as if touching the object would enable a sort of experience of its authenticity, and almost like the magical power it exercises over us could still be possible, and then convert it into some sort of ideological power. But but yes, so this phenomena, I mean, here this particular video is pretty much for if I'm watching it for the first time and I have no idea about the ASMR and other kind of things, but at least there is a sense of technology there, and the whispering. So almost like there's a sensual engagement with these kind of images, which they sound strange. Are they scans? Are they what they are really are? But we see they are not analog. They seem to exist in a screen. They are made for a screen. And we all also know about our experience of the world being mediated by the computer screen. And so there is a sort of kind of in the sense of electronic dimension there that we engage with, and seems to be what you've been trying to engage with. But particularly, I think what is interesting here is the idea of the product placement and how everything becomes like monetized, in a sense, like even if you Google very quickly, or I don't use Google, I use another search engine, but still, while you were talking, if you do that, immediately appears like Apple, or how this phenomena starts to be monetized, or starts to be and product placement is basically at the core of that. You know, we don't maybe see it, or we don't understand it, but it's what enables profit generation from companies who operate in the kind of capitalism, I guess.
Lucia, do you want to maybe say what you're writing? Or can you join? No.
Can read what Lucia wrote. So Lucia wrote, I'm not able to speak.
Oh, I'm able to speak, sorry.
It's fine. So Lucia wrote in the chat box, I think the tangible has also to do with socio-materiality, and as existing on its own in the space, they are with the meaning we're giving them in a post-human sense. So, Ofri, you can make...
No, that's why I asked Lucia to...
No. I mean, questions of matter and materiality, in a sense, is what I guess I'm just maybe speculating, but tangible. The sort of the technological experience is all about immateriality, right? So we basically what we remember when we were discussing that photograph where Ofri is holding the minerals. That is an image that somehow conveys a connection between one and zeros data, and the kind of the matter from which those one and zeros emerge. So and we kind of lost that. We don't really think about it. We basically see screens and see whether it's pixels, whether it's one and zeros, or whether it is whatever it is that somehow creates stimulation. It's stimulating us. We don't stimulate our brain. We don't really understand the kind of the infrastructural and matter that is behind. So yes, in the sense, this the question of tangible or intangibility and tacticality and touching and barriers relates to that, and it's of course also connected with social conditions. So it's not just about nature or deforestation and the notion that extractivism is about destroying the planet, but it's also about perpetuating social relations based on labor exploitation, and that's where the social materiality might be relevant. Post-human sense is quite important in the sense that, as we were talking about, technology And the intermingling of technology and the body created the cyborg being the manifestation of the body post its human physical existence. So yes, that's what I could maybe bring together here in terms of comments. Unless you want to say anything else, Ofri. I could ask you another question, which maybe can help us bring things together and progress, and maybe then conclude at some point. So what do you see any connection between this work and the photographic series that we saw, or do you think they are quite separate, or what were you thinking when you make this particular video, and kind of what was kind of the driving force behind it, or work that you were doing at the time?
I think it was a process. As I mentioned, this video was before, and it's kind of emerged from a performance under the same name that I think at the beginning we were even thinking of doing together. So it was based on kind of one-on-one sittings that and taking those objects to propose for each one their own kind of future map of objects. And so it's already played with this idea of you choose an object and then I perform some sort of ASMR session and produce a map of a predicting map for you. So that actually those series of work are really, I don't know, more in terms of interest and maybe more intuitively related to one another. They're all related to some sort of kind of age-old or occult practices that oftentimes surround or include body object, oftentimes some sort of data or some sort of Michelle, maybe you can, I'm sorry, but maybe you can mute yourself because we keep hearing echoes all the time. So that will be very helpful. Thank you so much. So body, objects, data, or different diagrams or systems of knowledge or system of data and prediction. And always this idea of knowing the future or knowing, knowing the future is somehow put together more abstract spiritual practices and more data related one and put them in kind of humoristic contradiction or under question mark. Yeah, so I think they are related, and my attempt or my quest to work with digital objects or objects that were taken from life and from spiritual practices and body practices to museums, and now they're in digital forms, and I'm trying to bring body practices to work with them, is very much where those work are heading. Is also the center of my recent piece called Leaking Lands. So yeah.
I mean, we have maybe 10 minutes, so maybe Ofri, you could tell us a little bit more for the,
the audience about Leaking Lands?
Yes, because of course we all here have not yet encountered the work, but and it's a work in progress. But maybe you could just maybe make the connection, particularly the question of the museum and how you are evolving your work in that direction. And
Thank you for asking. So, Leaking Lands is a video installation, three screens video installation that is based on a research, both artistic research and academic research, that begins with an error. It starts with a night in September 3 years ago, when in one night the entire National Museum of Brazil with 20 million objects burned to ashes, basically, because of an error, because there was no running water in the fire hydrants, although we know that this is not really an error. There's less and less private water in Brazil, dry became kind of a condition. But what's interesting and where I kind of got into the story is that almost none of it survive in the digital world. You will think that in these days when everything is copied and, and has millions of pictures, there will be more, higher surviving rate in the digital sphere. But the only thing that survived was a virtual tour produced by Google. So it's actually a product of Google that is sitting on Google servers and based on the same technology that your street is being captured, that was developed by the CIA. It really has nothing to do, not with Brazil and not with museum, but it's a product that what you see is the museum, that you can visit a museum that no longer exists. The other thing that survived is a very kind of raw and ghost-like user-generated collection. So Wiki Commons organization ask users to upload pictures they took. So it's the most opposite of institutional collection. It's photos that like amateur, really classic, poor images, very, very diverse and imbalanced in many ways. And the third one is a group of 3D models, and similar to the one you saw today, that also been produced by different parties and very non-consistent. And I take those three remains and I'm trying to think about them, or residues. I'm trying to think about them less of a kind of fixed form and much more as almost like an opportunity to reimagine, not to rebuild the museum, of course, that's what they do, but for us to reimagine how can we think when things are collapsing, when there are ashes and there is no water, and there are some images are only in digital, a meteorite survived because it's a meteorite, and other things are, and then a lot of other social orders and bodies are no longer available, and some have survived, but there's no museum to practice them. So all those residues, I'm trying to think about it in more active form. And with the video, I'm taking those digital museum objects and try to think about almost site of intervention or to inhabit them. Sometimes I invite people to take me on walks in the virtual tour and I meet them there and they speak about objects and show me stuff. And in other parts that are very relevant to stuff we've seen today, I work with a choreographer from the America named Luciana Sugar, who developed this practice called pleasure practice, which is very much for her the idea of growing a decolonized body or new body through and bring the body back to the sense of pleasure, which is for her the exact opposite of the colonized body that is always put to work, always produced, always, put to use. So for her, traveling into the inner system of breathing, it's sometimes from the mouth to the butthole, and sometimes it's sweat, and sometimes it's skin. It's really being in touch with the body in different ways. And I'm taking her methodology, with her, of course, her methodology, and try to apply or to put those museum objects subjected to those systems of pleasure and of movement. And I start to, as you've seen in the video, to travel inside them, which are not real, these are machine-made spaces, right? Because objects are only scanned from outside. But if you try to zoom in, the computer produces speculative sites, but they're not real, and they are always fragmented. So I try to think about those digital objects that are only incidentals and accidentals as a way to re-engage with our own bodies and breathing and pleasure with those objects in their kind of current state, which the original material is now ashes, but the digital has its own life. And yeah, so this is kind of the major project, and both Miguel and Hilit been kind of in a long dialogue with me about this project, and it's going to be fully edited by the end of the month.
Yeah, so yeah, it's quite an interesting piece, and brings a lot of some of the questions that are common in Ofri's practice are also kind of put forward here, but it introduces particular questions around the museum, and data, and e-capitalism and product placement like Google and all that. But it's somehow starting from a specific episode, and you not being from Brazil, so there's no personal connection there. So it's really a research and analytic approach for this episode, which can be seen as a sort of it's symptomatic of the days in which you live, but also in terms of erasure of a culture, particularly indigenous cultures in the South, in global South, or in what is now Brazil, but also in terms of how museums operate and what is the matter against technology and data, like the meteorite which survived the fire. But also, so that's kind of interesting, having this as a starting point, as a trigger to engage in a multi-layered, complex threads and topics that combine these ideas. And for me, I think from what I have been discussing with you is really around the experience and how experiences today are hyper-mediated. When we are, particularly say people like me who comes from a museum, works in museums or has worked in museums, and there is this historic understanding of our work as related to caring for stuff like objects or archives or whatever, but there's a physical element, there's matter there, and suddenly we are bombarded by companies and people wanting us to convert that encounter with the object, or the object even understood in a very broad sense, which might not even be tangible, a tangible thing, but replacing that by a mediated experience through the screen, through say Google experiences or Google Art and Culture Museum visits. So that's really important to, like going back to what Hilit was asking or talking about early on in terms of like a collective movement of resistance toward this kind of digital world in which you live. I suspect that it's like she said something around we need to be critical, we also are complicit, or we need to be complicit in order to be critical. I suspect that is like there is almost like this sense of there is no alternative. We are, as if the world cannot be different, and the alternative would be to withdraw from living with technology and go back to a kind of an ancient time in which we would be like secluded, or like living in a state of like almost like a Rousseau style state of detached from society. But on the other hand, there is a need to develop a sort of collective consciousness, or what Marx would call like a consciousness of the subject, of the data subject, no longer maybe of the proletarian, but of the data subject in which we are being converted or transformed today. And this is potentially what enables some sort of resistance here or there, which may start with small steps, like not using Google to browse, but using, say, DuckDuckGo. But potentially DuckDuckGo one day we will be aware of the connections that we are hidden. I'm not sure, like you just said, Google Street View being connected, say, with CIA or whatever, right? So it's really a world that is the corporate, I think it has to do with the corporatization of experience in everyday life. And I think that's what in this film that you're making, this film installation, may be also interesting to engage with, apart from all the layers that are there. Okay, maybe I see there are more questions in the chat. Yes, exactly. Tini was making comment about the fire and what was lost in that. So I think we're coming to an end, unless Ofri, you want to say anything else?
Thank you for all your thoughts and your time and the questions, generosity.
Well, thank you, Ofri, for such an engaging dialogue that we've been having over the years, and for such a brilliant work. Thanks, Hilit and Eleanor and Elena from RTS for the support you've been providing to Ofri. and that also helped this exhibition to be realized. And thank you all for being here. We will be in touch. There will be more things to happen. I will stop recording now, and then we have another 1 minute. Thank you so much. See you soon.